Come on, we can cheer for that, can we not? Hey, listen, hey, my name is Drew. If we have not met, I'm the lead pastor here at North Point, and we are one church that meets in multiple locations. Today, I'm in Springfield at our Springfield campus, but joining us live, Springfield, can you help me welcome Nixa to church this morning? Nixa campus, good to see you guys. We also got Republic, Missouri. Republic, good to see you too. Welcome to church. It's a good day. We had 97 baptisms last week. I know we talked about that locally at our campuses already, but I just want to celebrate that. That's awesome. I mean, that's like the real thing. Don't take it for granted. You know what I mean? Like for me, like you can look at those stories and every one of those, we put a number up there, but every one of those numbers is a name, is a face that matters to God. And like God is still working. I can get caught up in the algorithm and the doom and gloom of what's going on in the world, or I can read a different headline that says God is still moving in our community. He's still reaching and saving people. He's still changing lives, and he's using North Point and the people of North Point to do it. So I want to say thank you to everyone who's been a part of this church and being on mission to help us reach this city with the good news of Jesus. It needs it. So, hey, I'm going to talk today about the book of Ephesians. We're in the book of Ephesians this week. We're taking one book of the Bible as we go through this series, and this week we are in the book of Ephesians. And the main idea, the main thing that I want to think about today is this concept of where does God dwell? Where does God dwell? The Apostle Paul wrote this letter to a church at Ephesus, and he talks about a lot of things. But one of the things I just kind of grabbed this week, this idea, he talks about the dwelling place of God and where does God dwell? So that's going to be the main thing I want to land today, is answering that question, where does he dwell today? It's about 11 years ago, 2015, my family moved to Springfield, Missouri. So we moved here from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it was my job that brought me here. I worked for a company, and they relocated me to Springfield, Missouri. And kind of the way it went down is it went down pretty quick. It was like, hey, how quickly can you get there? And so it's one of those things, we had a house to sell and the whole thing. And so my boys were 2 and 4. So we were in that stage of life with 2 little kids. We moved several states away to move here to Missouri. And the company that moved me here, they put me in like an extended stay hotel over by Mercy Hospital for a month. So for a month, they got me out here quick and said, hey, we'll get your family out here in a month and the whole thing. So I lived in this extended stay hotel in the middle of Springfield, Missouri. And I was just basically going to work every day with nothing else to do. So I was by myself, didn't have my family. I was living here, but this place hadn't become home yet. Any dudes know what I mean? Like when you're away from your family, I regress pretty hard to caveman tendencies, like very quickly when my family is not around. And so I'm living here by myself. I was working 12-hour days because I didn't know anybody. I had nothing else to do. So I just work all day at the office. And I learned pretty quickly that Springfield, Missouri is home to a world famous cashew chicken, you know? I knew nothing about the city. People were like, oh, you got to try the cashew chicken. I'm like, okay, well, where do you go? Where do you go? Where do you go? So again, living by myself, I have nothing else to do. I would work long days, and then I would just take whatever recommendation of where to get cashew chicken on the way out the door. I ate cashew chicken every night for probably about 20 nights in a row. It wasn't good. It was delicious. It was wonderful. It wasn't good for my physical health or my emotional well-being, but it was fantastic. I want you to turn to your neighbor, maybe the one you don't know. You're going for Chinese food after church right now. Where do you go? What's the place that you know about that they need to know about? Nixa, Republic, Springfield. Tell your neighbor where you go for Chinese food. You might find a new favorite right now in church. You might find a hidden gem you don't know about. Yell some out at me. What do we got? What do we got in Springfield? Hong Kong Inn. What else? What is that? Hong Kong Inn on Sunshine, not to be confused with any other Hong Kong Inn. Yeah, I was in Nixa last night at our Saturday night service, and this guy pulled me aside and he told me about some place in Ozark, which I shall not name. And he was like, you got to go there, but don't go there after it rains. I'm like, I don't even know what that means, but like, I'm definitely not going there at all, my guy. This message is not sponsored by any local Chinese food restaurants, but I got to give you my go-tos if you're with me, all right? So number 1, Chinese food, not sponsored by anyone today. I just love it so much. Corner 21. Anyone been to Corner 21? We got any fans? Okay. All right. Now here's my straight cashew chicken hierarchy, top 3. No one asked for this, but you know, I'm going to tell you anyway. It's a controversial subject. You got to understand my grading process for how I think about Springfield cashew chicken first. There's a few things that matter to me that maybe don't matter to you. If I walk into a Chinese food restaurant and the floor's a little bit sticky, you know what I mean? Like your shoes stick to the ground, but the food's still good, I'm in. Come on, because that's, you know what I'm talking about. I see some people understand. Y'all can keep your floors sticky and people still come here. The food's that good that we overlook the sticky floors and we still come. That says something about the quality of an establishment. If I go through a drive-through window to pick up a to-go box of cashew chicken, which I've been known to do, I want to feel a little bit of remorse and shame when I feel the weight of the bag in my hand. You ever do that? You're like, oh, that full weight is going into my body right now. That is shameful. There's something about me that enjoys that feeling of like, oh, that's a challenge. I can eat this whole thing. All right, here's my top 3. You ready? No one asked for this, but anyway, I'm gonna go Canton Inn on Sunshine. Anyone Canton Inn? That's the place, that's solid. Not as big of a cheer. All right, I can see my flavors not the same. Cashew chicken on Battlefield, the drive-through cashew station. It's like the size of like a closet, but somehow they make delicious chicken out of there. If they ask you if you want white meat only, say no. Don't say yes to white meat only. I want every bite to be a surprise of what I'm about to get into. I don't want to know. I want the surprise of the bite. Top 1 overall though, I'm going Happy China on Battlefield. Happy China, y'all don't know. Happy China, thank you. Happy China's about to get some business today. It's inside of a gas station. So you can fill up a tank on unleaded and get your cashew chicken while your tank is filling up. Like, that's my type of place. So I feel like I'm losing respect the more I talk about this, so I'm gonna keep on moving. I was living here and I was in this hotel, like wearing at the end of the day, I was like wearing like dirty sweatpants with a stack of like Chinese takeout boxes on the counter building up. I was living here, but this wasn't home. I was living here, but it wasn't home yet. It didn't become home until my family got here. I learned pretty quickly that where I am doesn't become home until it's who I'm there with. Anyone who's ever moved different states, you realize pretty quickly that home isn't where you are. Ultimately, it's who you're there with. The minute that Kristen and my family moved back into my house, we became a home again. Home actually is about the people you're with, not necessarily the place that you are. Today, we're gonna talk about where does God choose to make his home. And we're gonna look at the book of Ephesians to do that. Background on the book of Ephesians is this, is Paul is writing this letter to a church at a city called Ephesus. It's a big city. It's a center of commerce. It's a center of trade. And he's writing this letter to the Christians there. For context, there's probably a couple 100,000 people that live in this city and maybe 2,000 Christians. So you're talking about 1 to 2% of the population is a Jesus follower. They're in the minority. They're actually going through some persecution because the center of Ephesus is a giant temple to a god named Artemis. Artemis is this god, and there's a big statue of Artemis. If you get inside to the innermost part of that temple, you find a statue of Artemis, and this massive temple is built. It's actually one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. If you look it up later, it's this massive building. It was way ahead of its time with architecture and building what they built. This massive thing. It was everything that man could build was exemplified in this temple of Artemis, and everybody worshiped Artemis. Back in the day, the temple represented the bank. It was the commerce. It was how you made connections, how you met people. Everything revolved around the temple in the middle of the city. But there's a God in the middle of the temple that's not even real. So as people begin to step away from Artemis and begin to follow Jesus, they actually were cutting themselves out of the banking system. They were cutting themselves maybe out of a job. They were cutting themselves out of social circles. And all of a sudden, it costs something to follow Jesus in Ephesus. And so Paul is writing this letter to encourage this church in Ephesus to help them understand, what are you a part of today? To be an Ephesian back then meant to be under Artemis's protection, and outsiders were simply outside. So if I'm a Christian in Ephesians reading this letter, I'm a minority. I'm probably persecuted for my beliefs. And this entire city I live in revolves around this thing of where Artemis lives. Artemis lives in this temple. And so if I'm looking at this and saying that the entire world seems to revolve around this temple of Artemis, where then does my God live? I know their God lives there. You can't miss it. The skyline is the temple. You cannot miss where their God lives. But where does my God live? Where does he dwell? Where do I go to find him is the operative question. And you and I might not have a huge temple in the middle of our city dedicated to a false god, but I think the things in our culture are a little bit different. I think we serve different gods that maybe wouldn't show up in a statue, but it would be a God called never enough. Our culture worships this insatiable need to always have more. Our culture worships a God called be comfortable. And so we're all making sacrifices to get more and be more comfortable. And the way of our culture is going towards this God of never enough and be comfortable. But what does our God do? Where do we find our God? Where does he dwell in our city today? So Paul answers this question in a pretty awesome way in Ephesians 2 and 3. But to get the full picture of the weight of the answer that he gives of where is God living, we have to go on a quick 10-minute Bible nerd journey to how we got to Ephesus to begin with. And so I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about this idea that seems through the Bible of where God dwells. The Bible talks about how God created us in the book of Genesis because he delighted in us. He wanted to spend time with us. God actually enjoys you. He formed you because he wants to know you and he loves you and he likes you, and this God of heaven created that. And so we get into the Bible story, we get to the book of Exodus, and if we get in the book of Exodus, I'm gonna kind of walk through this progression here. So where did God dwell in the Old Testament? There's this idea in Exodus 20, when the people of God have left Egypt and left slavery, God begins to step into time and he begins to create a dwelling place called the tabernacle in the middle of the gathering. And so if we can pull up the where God dwells here in the beginning of the Bible, where did God dwell then? He dwelt in a place. In the book of Exodus, people are leaving Egypt, and he makes this command to people and says, hey, I want you to build a place for me in the middle of your encampment. This is the mobile society. Now they're wandering through the wilderness, setting up tents on this journey as they go. And he says, hey, while you're wandering, while you're walking, while this nation is going, I want you to build me a tabernacle in the middle of the encampment. A tabernacle really just means a dwelling place. It's a house for me to live in. Dwelling means to actually set down roots. I wasn't dwelling in that hotel room with my stacks of takeout boxes. I was staying there, I was surviving there, but I wasn't dwelling there. God is saying, I want to build a dwelling place, a tabernacle in the middle of the people. So in Exodus, you see this idea. He said, build me a sanctuary that I may dwell in their midst. The God of creation, who created everything that we see and know today, says, hey, I want to dwell in the middle of where you are. I don't want to be distant. I don't want to be far. I want to make sure that you see me, that you know where it is I live. I want to dwell in their midst. And so they created this tent, and I got a picture of the tabernacle. We'll pull up here. In the middle of their encampment, they would set up all of their tents around this encampment. In the middle, this is what the tabernacle looked like, and it was where God dwelled. It wasn't just a church building. It was like this idea that God lives in the middle of us. And so you can see all the nation of Israel would camp around it. In the middle would be this tabernacle, this dwelling place of God. And the reason why, I have this picture like the cross section in the middle of it, because it was known that God's presence and his glory would actually manifest in the middle of this temple. And you could see the glory of God come down, Exodus says. You can imagine being in this camp and you'd be like, wow, a pillar of fire and a cloud of smoke and all these things, like God is amongst us. He is here. God lives in the middle of his people. And they would have incense offerings and things. So you could see God. You could smell the offerings that were happening. You could smell God. You had this very real idea that God was in the middle of his people. Story goes on through the Bible as you continue to read through this idea of dwelling place and how God draws near and how he comes near to us. And then we begin to see the next really kind of phase of how God dwells throughout the Bible is in the birth of Christ. When Jesus is born, we'll sing these songs at Christmas time and use the word Emmanuel. That just means that God is with us. How did God draw near to us in the life of Christ? He came in human form to be Jesus amongst us. So when Jesus came down, he claimed to be the Son of God. He was God with skin on. He came and he lived among us. John, the book of John, it says this, that he came to us as a person. Where was God in the Old Testament? He was in a place. But when Jesus is born, it's actually God amongst us, and he goes from a place to a person. John uses this word in the beginning of the book of John. He says that Jesus came amongst us, and it says the word became flesh and he dwelt among us. So we have, he dwelt among us in the tent in the Old Testament, and kind of the same root word that he uses right here. It's this idea dwelt. It's a noun that becomes a verb. He tabernacled amongst us. He's telling people, hey, remember that tent that your ancestors had in the middle? He is now actually the tent. He is living amongst us. There's not a pillar of fire and smoke and this whole thing. He actually became a person so that you and I, when we're searching for God, where do you find God? You look at Jesus. So it went from a place to a person. And if you're here this morning and you're not a believer and you're just kind of checking this Christianity thing out, this really, to simplify it down, the linchpin is this, is we really just believe that Jesus is who he said that he was. Jesus claimed to be the Son of God. He worked miracles. We believe that he died and that he was raised from the dead 3 days later to really prove everything that he said. And he ascended. We believe that he is who he said that he was. If you're a follower of Jesus, it really comes back to what do you do with Jesus? You have to reckon with who this guy was, what his claims were, and do you believe them or not? Once you believe him, you begin to become a follower of Jesus. And so if you're here and you're questioning it and all this church, maybe Bible Belt stuff you grew up with, just come back to that place. Who's Jesus? Who is he really? He claimed to be the Son of God. And so we believe that that's who he was. God draw near to us and said, where do I find God? We look at Jesus. Jesus said things, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. Bold claim. If you've seen me, you've seen God. And so this idea where it went from a place to a person, this thing in world history where John chapter 20, he's raised from the dead. He's come on the other side of the grave, and he looks at his disciples before he ascends to heaven. He says, as the Father sent me, so now I'm sending you. He charges his followers to go be the example. As the Father sent me, now I am sending you. Then he breathed on him and said, receive the Holy Spirit. Then he ascends, right? So now you've got this picture through world history where it went from a place, it was a tabernacle that you went to find God, to a person. The person of Jesus became God's representation on the earth. And here we come to the book of Ephesians, where it applies to you and it applies to me. Where does God dwell today? In Ephesus, in Republic, in Nixa, in Springfield, Fair Grove, Stratford, Willard. Where does God dwell today? Ephesians 2:19 and 22, he says this, you now are fellow citizens and saints and members of the household of God. He's talking to these people. Remember who they are. They're in the middle of this city saying, I can see where their God lives, but how are people supposed to know who our God is? How are they supposed to see God today? Jesus isn't physically here anymore. The tabernacle's not here. How are people supposed to see God? He tells them, you're not strangers. You're not aliens. You are citizens and saints and members of the household of God, built on the foundation of the apostles and the prophets, Christ Jesus being the cornerstone. What's he saying? He's saying that the entire thing is built on this. He's like, the foundation of the house of God is built on the apostles and the prophets and what they said, and the cornerstone of Jesus. The cornerstone's an architectural term. It's the corner, it's the bottom corner rock on a house that everything is aligned to. If you want to know if something is aligned or not, you don't look at the world, you look at Jesus. And so we're building this thing with Jesus as the cornerstone. He says, in whom the whole structure, remember, they're thinking about this giant temple. Where's our building? This whole structure is being joined together, grows into a holy temple in the Lord. He's saying you are actually the building blocks of the thing. You are the temple, in whom you also are being built together into a, watch that, dwelling place of God. Where does God dwell? In the Old Testament, he lived in a tent. In Jesus' day, Jesus says, I am the tabernacle. If you want to see God, look at me. He charged to the New Testament church, which applies to Ephesus, applies to us. He's saying that you're actually the temple. You actually are the dwelling place of God. If we look back and we see the place of the temple, and then we see the person of Jesus, where is the third thing today? What he's telling these people, where do people see God? How do they see God? Where is our temple? He's saying it's actually you. It's me. How do people see God in our community now? We are the people. This dwelling place is moved, and now you are being built now into a dwelling place of God. Whether you're here in Springfield, Republic, or Nixa, I'm gonna ask you to do something kind of weird in church. Just look around for a second. Look around the room. Stranger danger, I know, introvert's nightmare. What you're looking at are building blocks of the temple of God. Where does God dwell? He dwells individually in you and then collectively in us. So how will people in Nixa, Republic, Springfield, Stratford, Willard, Fairgrove, Ozark, how will they see God? They'll see God by seeing us. That's a powerful concept to think about. How will our community see God? Where does God dwell? He dwells individually in you, but collectively in us. He's telling the church in Ephesians, we're not building a new building that's going to be the center of the thing that people will look and see. He's saying, I want you to live in such a way that when you show up to where you work, when you show up to your home, when you show up to your neighbor in that conversation at the mailbox, I want you to show up as the tabernacle, as the temple, as the place in your innermost being where God dwells. And the innermost being of that tent and that tabernacle, in the very middle of it, the deepest that you could go into that tent is where you found the presence of God. Temple of Artemis, as far as you could go into that temple, you'd find a statue of a God that's not even real. When people around our lives come into the deepest place of who we are, what God will they find sitting on the throne of our life? How do we represent this thing in our community? It's a powerful picture that the Bible is telling us of how God chooses to dwell. The last concept on this map is this idea of a promise. We can see that there's a place, there's a person, there's a people. And at the very end of the Bible, the last page, I'm a big fan of context. How did the story begin? How did the story end? Revelations 21, there's a story where they're writing and saying Jesus comes down from heaven, and the thing that comes out of his mouth, he says this, that the dwelling place of God is with men, and he will dwell with them. The end of the story is that Jesus that returns again and makes his dwelling place with us again. It says at that moment, he will wipe every tear, pain will be no more, suffering will be no more, and he will make all things right again. That is the journey of the dwelling place of God. It starts a long time ago and it ends in the future. It's important to understand we're in the middle of a story, and right now, the way our community sees the power of the dwelling place of God is how you and I show up every single day. We have responsibility in this thing. It's a powerful responsibility. I can know God and make him known. I can have something inside of me that actually becomes a representation of how people in our community are going to meet God. So that all being said, if God dwells inside of us and in the church, what does that mean for you and I and our Tuesday? If I've lost you at this point, come back to me. Like, some people went on a Bible nerd journey with me and are like, that was awesome. Other people are like, man, I got to go to work tomorrow. What are you trying to say, man? Here's what I would say. If it's true that you and I individually are dwelling places of God, and collectively this church has become a dwelling place of God where people experience God, how do we show up on Tuesday? I'm gonna give you 3 handles to pick up and grab going into your week of what does that mean for me? First one is this, that an invitation to God often requires an eviction of other things. When I begin to invite God into my innermost being, I say, God, I want you to take up residence in my heart at a deep level. Sometimes that means that other things have to go. We were at a Saturday night service a couple weeks ago, and there's some people Chris and I have been meeting to connect with, and they were there at the Saturday night, and I had this great idea. I was like, hey, they're here, we're here, like, we got time right now. I'm like, what are you guys doing right now? You guys wanna hang out? They're like, sure. I'm like, hey, great idea. Why don't you guys just come over to the house? It's like 5 or 6 people I invited to the house. They're all like, yeah, that sounds great. That sounds awesome. I go to my wife. I'm like, hey, good news. This thing that we have not talked about, I just solved a problem of connecting with people we're meaning to connect with by spontaneously inviting them all over to the house right now. Huh? You don't have to be very smart to know how the story ends. This is not a good story. How many wives are already like elbowing your husband, like, don't you ever do that again, right? Because I didn't think, she was like, we're just normal people. We got a couple teenage kids. We have a busy life. Our house probably looks like yours some days where the laundry pile's on the floor. Like, don't get too holy on me. We got things where our kitchen looks like we use it. It's lived in, right? So she was like, Drew, our house is a mess. Are you crazy? So I had 2 options, either cancel the plans or rally my sons and be like, look, we're getting home right now and we're gonna turn on Jock Jams full blast and the most high intensity power cleaning you've ever done in your life is gonna happen. I texted everyone and lied. I was like, hey, we won't be home till 7:40. I'm like, get home by 7:15. We got 20 minutes to make this place shine. You know what I mean? Anyone else ever do this? Okay. I just would like to admit that I've never been into anyone's house and looked at your baseboards. I won't do it. You don't do it to me, I won't do it to you. You know what I mean? An invitation to God often requires an eviction of other things. Me living in that hotel with my stacks of takeout cashew chicken boxes. How many when my family moved home, the takeout boxes had to go. My 12-hour work days had to go, because if I was gonna live with my family, if we were going to make this house a home for my family, certain things about my bachelor lifestyle of Chinese takeout every night just had to go. There's certain things, an invitation to God. God, I want you to dwell in my life in the deepest place. I wanna be this dwelling place. I wanna show up in a way in my life where when people see me, they experience something of God. It's a powerful thing that you're inviting me into. I wanna invite you into my life in that way. But if God wants to move in, the question we always have to ask is, what needs to then move out? What are things that I have to move out of my heart that have to make room for him? I mentioned for me, like I can be someone who bows down to that God of never enough. I want to find a way to make more and do more and get more. And I'm kind of wired that way to go achieve and do stuff. But there's times I have to lay down the God of get more and do more. You know, I have to lay down some of those things if I want to make room for a God that wants to dwell and take up residence in my heart. He's not going to fight for heart space. There's things I have to move out of my heart to invite him fully in. If you go to Ephesians 4 and 5, the rest of this book, Paul begins to talk about really the practical outworkings of this truth. He talks about marriage. He talks about kids. He talks about employees and bosses. He talks about this whole thing about, if that's true, how then should we live? Ephesians 4, 5, and 6 goes through that entire thing. In the middle of that, he has this thing where he says, hey, let the thief no longer steal, but let him work and give to the poor with the money that he earns. He says, let all bitterness and clamor and malice come away from you. That's the backbiting, the negativity, the cynicism, the critical spirit, the words coming out of our mouth. But instead show kindness and forgiving other people as Christ has forgiven you. He begins to describe this great exchange where we say, hey, there's things in my life that I gotta let go of. I gotta move that thing out, not just to move it out, because I'm extending an invitation for God to come in and make his dwelling place within me. The second handle for this is people are most likely to experience God by experiencing us. If there's something that is true, it's that God still decides to use that the works and the wonders of God are most oftenly experienced through the people of God. And when you and I begin to take up some responsibility in this and be like, wait a minute, I'm here to represent God where I'm going on Tuesday, it changes things. You begin to partner with God. You begin to think about things differently. I met somebody this morning who came around North Point a month ago, made a decision to follow Jesus, got water baptized this week, and is serving in our Connections team today. Like, that is awesome. I'm like, how did you get here? She's like, I came with a friend. It's the invitation from a friend into the house. It's an invitation from a friend. It's somebody that you knew. Almost all the time when God wants to move, he works through normal people like you and I. People are most likely to experience God by first experiencing us. That means this, that if I'm the dwelling place of God, God clocks in when you do. You show up to your Mondays, a lot of people going back to school right now. When you clock in, when you walk into your place in your space, and maybe it's even just checking the mail on your street and the neighbor that doesn't mow his lawn as much as you would like. It's that, how do I show up in that conversation? How do I show up in that place when I'm walking, wait a minute, God in me? The person's most likely to experience God by first being around me. How does the temperature change when you walk into the room? How does the place move when you walk in? Because when you walked in, the dwelling place of God walked in with you. The third one is this, is when we become the dwelling place of God, when I begin to internalize this message of, wait a minute, God lives in me, he makes his home in my heart, and collectively now I'm a part of this church, this people group that is now the representation of how God chooses to show up in the city that I live in today. I begin to ask myself different questions. I ask the question, instead of asking, what's in this for me? I begin to ask, what's in me for this? What's in this for me, or what's in me for this? There's a big difference. Most of you know my story. I haven't been a preacher my whole life, but I've been in church every Sunday my whole life. And there's been a lot of Sundays I walked out of church, got in the car, and was like, didn't really get anything out of that. I know that never happens here at North Point because we're just so awesome, right? That's the reality, right? But what that indicated in that moment is I went with a mentality to come in and consume something. I was looking for somebody to feed. I was looking for consumption, not creation. I was looking to get something for me. Maybe on that Sunday, actually, what me showing up at church that Sunday, maybe it wasn't actually for me to get something. Maybe there was something in me for this. Maybe there was someone in the lobby that I needed to meet. Maybe there was kindness I needed to extend. Maybe actually in this season, in this place and space, it's actually not about you. You might be at a job right now that you don't like because you're not getting much out of it. You might be in a place where you're like, I'm just not getting anything out of this. What is in this for me? You can be careful with that question, because there's times that's me bowing down to the God of never enough. I always want more. But when God begins to take up residence in my home, I begin to show up to work, to school, to my neighborhood, to what I'm doing with an attitude that says, God, you put something in me. What's in me for this? That coworker that you have that you're not gonna have for very long. That person in your class that you might not know for very long. That one business transaction where as soon as the transaction ends, you know you'll never see that person again. What's in you for that? Maybe their experience with you over the next month, 2 months, the next school year is actually why you were there. And it's not about you getting something out of it in this moment, but wait a minute, the living God dwells in me. Maybe how I treat this person in this moment, in this season, is actually what's in me for this. Maybe why I'm here actually isn't about me at all. This doesn't change where you go. We're all gonna do the same Monday tomorrow, but this should change how we go there. It should change the mentality through which I answer the phone, the mentality through which I talk to that customer. Wait a minute, I'm here to represent God in this place. It doesn't change where we go, but it does absolutely change how you go there. When I begin to think this, that I am the temple of God, I am where he lives. I'm the best shot at how my coworker's gonna find Jesus. Don't overthink it. Just be kind, be loving, be gentle, be all of those things, and watch what God will do once you change your mindset about this. I put it in your notes. Where do we find Jesus in the book of Ephesians? We find Jesus. He is wherever you are. He looked at his disciples and said, the Father sent me, so now I'm sending you. Maybe you're not going to work tomorrow. Maybe you're not going to school. Maybe you're not going to whatever club or thing you've got going on tomorrow. Maybe you're not actually going there. Is it possible that you're actually being sent there? Is it possible you're actually being sent to work tomorrow? Sent into your school? Sent to answer that phone call from the family member that you'd rather send a voicemail? Maybe in that moment, God's saying, let me tabernacle with you. Let me represent myself through you. Would you join me in making all things new in the city that you live in? So what does it look like when God makes a dwelling place within us? It looks like the landscape of our city begins to change. Ephesus revolved around a God that wasn't even real. What would it look like if we had a mentality that went into our weeks that said, hey, I'm here to represent God? How might that actually change the place where you go tomorrow? It begins to change the landscape and the culture of the city that we live in. I could give some practical handles. I'm always gonna jump over to the Springfield Dream Center. It's part of who North Point is, or part of our team. It's what we do. It's our major missions emphasis as a church is locally here in our city. One of the biggest expressions of that is an outpost in Northwest Springfield called the Springfield Dream Center. As we gear up for back to school, we're gearing up there as well. Many of you served there last week to get those classrooms ready. Many of you gave into that fund to help us get those classrooms and those spaces ready. But we're providing free after-school care to over 60 kids in that neighborhood who otherwise wouldn't get it. 60 kids are gonna get out of school every day this school year and walk over to the Springfield Dream Center, where we're gonna love them, we're gonna care about them, we're gonna invest in them in ways that nobody else will. For some kids, that means teaching them how to read in a safe place. You guys remember if you were not good at reading when you were in elementary school, how embarrassing that was? Hey, read in front of the class. Those moments were like, I don't want to do this. This moment exposes my need, my gap. And so we have a program called Book Buddies down there, where people in the church, North Pointers, go down there one day a week and they spend time with kids teaching them how to read in a safe place. It's people like my mom, who's like the sweetest lady on the planet, and she's got pictures of her book buddies on her refrigerator. She goes down once a week and just spends time loving these kids and teaching them how to read in a place where she's not gonna make them feel dumb for not knowing how to do it. Like, it's simple things like that. It's this after school program. We're gonna teach emotional regulation and how when things don't go your way, how to react well. And for some of these kids, that's not been modeled in their home. And so we're teaching them how to respond to some of these things. For the middle schoolers and high schoolers at the Dream Center, we're gonna teach them entrepreneurship skills and how to manage money and how to prepare yourself to be able to take care of yourself when you get out of high school. This is what happens when a local church says, we'll be the temple, we'll be the resting place of God, we'll be the dwelling place of God. When people look around the city, they might see problems, they might see issues, they might see crime. Oh, but there's a little outpost in Northwest Springfield called the Springfield Dream Center that is a representation of Jesus lovers and Jesus followers choosing to stand up and say, I'll be a brick in the wall to represent God in this city. And for some of you, that might be, wow, I'm not gonna go start a nonprofit. I would encourage you to sign up to serve, sign up to go down there and find a way to help out if you can. I think about other stories in and around North Point. I think about the Republic cleaning team that comes in on Mondays. There's a group of people on Monday in Republic, and most of them are retired, but they come in on Mondays and they clean the church for us. And they enjoy doing it. They were telling me stories about like hiding a meatball around the carpet and like chasing the vacuum cleaner. I don't even know what's going on Mondays with the cleaning team in Republic. But all I know is they're laughing and having a good time. They're saying, hey, I maybe not have different things to offer, but I have Mondays. And I'm gonna be a brick in the wall to help make this place go. There's a team here in Springfield on Wednesdays, a reset team. They come in every Wednesday and they save us a lot of money and time and effort by volunteering Wednesday nights. They eat a meal together in that lobby and then they come and reset this room to make sure it's ready for the weekend. Shout out to the reset team here in Springfield, love y'all. I think about going to Nixa where there was a funeral on Friday for a member of our church family and they're going through great grieving and loss. And as I pulled into the funeral, I saw a couple of people. I saw Bruce and Brian McCracken. I saw them out in the parking lot. These are people who have busy lives, but at a Friday at 10:30, 11 a.m., they're putting on the yellow vest going out there and directing traffic for a funeral to make sure that we can come together and rally around a family. That's when God dwells inside of us, we start to make self-sacrificial things that say, not what's in this for me, but hey, what's in me for this? And it doesn't have to be spectacular. I was talking to my friend Jake about this message as I was kind of talking it through. He's like, yeah, I have a friend who owns an auto shop. And he comes in church by himself. He sits in the back row, comes in late, leaves early, like he's not there to make friends, but he runs this auto shop that does pretty well. And he made a decision last year. He said, hey, I'm gonna take the last 2 to 3 hours of every Friday, and I'm gonna actually work for free. I'm gonna have my guys work for free on cars that belong to single moms or widows that can't afford to have their car fixed. He's like, I don't necessarily have something to offer in other spaces. You don't want to give me a microphone to get up there and talk about the Bible, but I can give of what I have to others. I can be an outpost for God, a dwelling place for God. Some of these things are not crazy spiritual things. They're simple things of taking what you have, what is in you, and what is in me for this. Our culture and our city begins to change when we be able to take this charge, understand that, man, we're here to represent God in this city in simple, easy ways. In Ephesus, the city was oriented around a temple where the deepest thing on the innermost being was something that wasn't real. But inside of you and I, friends, when you begin to follow Jesus, the thing that God births inside of us, friends, is very real. And the outworking of the thing is this temple, is this picture, is this visible thing that our city and community sees of people who've learned to follow Jesus, to walk in his ways, to love people. So today you and I have an invitation to cultivate a heart, to create a dwelling place, an inner world for God. And when we do that individually and collectively, our community begins to change. My prayer for us today is that we would just be a people who honestly, humbly, as we listen to this word and maybe it challenges us or sparks ideas, that we would walk out of this place today with an honest prayer that says, God, here's my heart, make a dwelling place inside of me. Across our campuses, we're gonna close out here in just in a moment. I wanna remind you of a couple of things. The first one is this: if you've got connection cards or giving, we have boxes in the back for those things. I know our hosts talk about that already, but on the way out, you can drop those in there. The second thing is this: is we're a praying church. Like, we pray for those prayer requests. We also have prayer teams after our services. If you're here today and you need prayer for something, like, we believe in the power of prayer. As our service is dismissed, we're gonna have people down front in all of our locations available to pray with you. If you got something going on in your life right now, where you're like, man, I could just use some prayer right now. We would love to partner with you in that moment. But before we dismiss, I'm gonna ask you all to stand here in Springfield, Nixa, and Republic. If you wanna stand with me, I would love to pray for you as we go out of this place back into our day-to-day life. God, I thank you for this church. God, I thank you for North Point. God, I thank you for the people who are finding and following Jesus through the people of this church. God, I pray that this would be a season in us where collectively we begin to become this at an even more real way, that we would represent you in the community that we live in, that we would become the dwelling place and the resting place of God. God, I pray for this church as we've come to gather together as your church this week. Help us go out of those doors and be the church to a city that desperately needs it. God, we love you. Thank you for everything you've given us. In Jesus' name, amen. We love you guys. We'll see you next week.